Hey everyone, welcome to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson. Apologies, firstly, I haven't done one of these for a few months, sort of various reasons over the summer, taking a little bit of hiatus, but I will be looking to get back into the groove of doing these video interviews because they're a really fun and hopefully engaging way for you watching to share my thoughts on movie releases. So I will aim to do my favourite films of 2019 thus far very, very soon. For now, I just wanted to bring you my thoughts in advance of its UK release date on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I saw just the other night. It's out in the UK on the 14th of August, and I went to the press screening of it. Quentin Tarantino's ninth movie, which is somewhat controversial, depending on whether you consider his Kill Bill movies one movie or two movies. He's come out and said they're one movie, which is a bit cheeky because, frankly, they were released as two movies. But anyway, we won't get into that. So, new movie from Quentin Tarantino, as I said, Kill Bill, Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, Jackie Brown, Django Unchained, Hateful Eight, etc., Inglourious Bastards, Death Proof. Yeah, one of the most provocative and controversial directors of modern times, and a director who generates an extraordinary amount of attention through his not just explicit subject matter, but also his kind of very, in his best work, intelligent sort of subtextual meta reflections on the very nature of B-movie and trash cinema, the way that he absorbs lots of pulpy B-movie, sleazy, trashy movie influences, synthesizes them all together, and comes up with products that are demonstrably his, that are eccentrically, idiosyncratically Quentin Tarantino, unforgettable jukebox soundtracks, sort of pop culture laden dialogue. All of this was set down in Reservoir Dogs back in 1992, which kind of burst onto the indie movie scene, really took the world by storm and caused a lot of controversy over its violence. Though, as we know, the most notorious moment of violence in that, the ear-cutting scene, isn't actually seen. The camera pans away. And then, of course, Tarantino went on to make Pulp Fiction, which I consider one of the most endlessly rewatchable and brilliant films of all time. I'll never forget watching that at the age of 17 for the first time, not expecting very much, and being absolutely blown away by it within the first 10-15 minutes. So now we come to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and for me, I've had mixed responses to a lot of Quentin Tarantino's recent films. I think ever since I was going to say ever since Death Proof, even before that, even since Kill Bill, I think Tarantino has been in this kind of pattern of indulging himself, whereby he's aping the kind of grindhouse sleaze movies with which he grew up. But I've been curious and also not entirely sure as to whether he's actually had anything interesting to say from Kill Bill onwards. I think there have been flashes of brilliance in movies like Inglourious Bastards. I thought Django Unchained was really, really good up to a point, but way too long. I thought The Hateful Eight really was the first Tarantino movie that I'd seen where I thought he really doesn't have anything else to say in this. So I was a bit... I went into Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with a sense of sort of nervousness, because I this is the point where, without wishing to sound insulting, I kind of want Quentin Tarantino to kind of grow up as an artist. I want him to come back to actually saying something in the manner of something like Jackie Brown or Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs. So the story, as I imagine you probably already know from the multifaceted coverage that this film has already had, Leonardo DiCaprio is Rick Dalton, a fictional actor in 1969 Los Angeles, who has made his name starring in TV series, Western TV series Bounty Law. His sort of aspirations to move into films have fallen by the wayside, and he's ended up basically having carved himself a niche as the supporting bad guy in other Western TV series. There is also the incorporation of the real life Western TV series Lancer midway through this movie, and this is one of the things that Tarantino does. He mixes up fact and fiction seamlessly, and one of the ways in which people respond to this movie differently is very much dependent on how much of the history and sort of intertextual referencing you'll get from Tarantino in this. So Leonardo DiCaprio is the sort of boozy, sort of coming off the rails actor who is consumed with a sense of sort of self-pity and self-doubt, and is kind of wondering whether his moment has passed. He's also on the wrong side of the political divide. In 1969, the hippie movement is taking over. He spits and sneers at the hippies standing on the Los Angeles street corner. So he is on that side of the fence. his stunt double is Cliff Booth, played by Brad Pitt, who is suspected of having murdered his wife. We don't know for sure. There is a flashback that doesn't actually explicitly reveal what the answer is, but he's kind of implacable and taciturn, and he is basically Dalton's sort of driver, sort of confidant character who has doubled for him in various TV shows. But both of these guys now are possibly finding themselves in obsolete. There is an offer from a loquacious agent played by Al Pacino that maybe Rick can go into spaghetti westerns. This is 1969, so when the spaghetti western genre was really taking off after the likes of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Rick doesn't want to do that, hence why he ends up getting the Lancer gig. So all of that is going on, and then next to that, sort of running in parallel with that, you have the real life figures of Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. Sharon Tate, played by Margot Robbie, who in reality was the actress who, along with her friends, was murdered at Cielo Drive in Los Angeles by the followers of Charles Manson, the psychopath who formed the Manson family, which was the incident that is kind of widely credited with instilling a sense of disillusion in America as a whole. It's widely credited with bringing the hippie movement to a very, very ignominious end, and it instilled a sense of like moral ugliness and corruption and decay in the country. So her fate kind of runs parallel with Rick Dalton because she is next door neighbours to him. He kind of aspires to her career. He says, if I could just get in with Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate, maybe I've got a shot at the big time. So it contrasts the fate of these characters. And actually, for the most part, the movie sort of ambles along for about the first 2 hours, 10 minutes. It's a 160-minute movie in quite an, actually, it seems really odd to say this about a Tarantino movie, in a very, very endearing, very sweet, very understated kind of way. Those aren't adjectives you can normally apply to Tarantino, who is incredibly brash, provocative, kind of in your face. This has actually got, for the most part, quite a subdued, contemplative quality, which does bespeak of the thing that I want, which is that Tarantino has matured as a filmmaker. He's talking about male insecurity, he's talking about male loneliness in ways that I think are actually very funny and very sweet. A lot of it, in many ways, doesn't actually rely on the dialogue for which he has become famous. A lot of it is based around the physicality of Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, both of whom are really, really good. And they've achieved a kind of like weathered nobility as they've both got older. In fact, Brad Pitt, I thought, had a kind of Ryan O'Neal quality, particularly in the scenes where you see him driving around Los Angeles in Rick Dalton's car, in these shots beautifully shot by Robert Richardson. It goes without saying that Robert Richardson is one of the best cinematographers working in the business at the moment. He's worked extensively with the likes of Tarantino and also Oliver Stone and Martin Scorsese, and the attention to detail in the visual and physical landscape of this film is extraordinary. I mean, it's kind of like it's bathed in these warm sunset hues that also come emanating off the jukebox soundtrack. I mean, it emits the kind of optimism and warmth that was present in 1969 prior to that dreadful night in August when everything changed. And the movie's sense of period detail and attention, I mean, Tarantino is very famous. He's almost got kind of a fetishistic attention to detail in the kind of sort of nuts and bolts of it, not necessarily in terms of like the wider scope. I mean, Tarantino often distorts history for satirical and comic effect. You look at something like Inglourious Basterds, which had Adolf Hitler, killed and had the war being ended prematurely. It was a Jewish revenge fantasy. But in terms of the sort of seeming authenticity of the milieu of the environment, this is a beautiful and gorgeous film to look at and to listen to as well. And certainly the reenactments of the Western series on which we find Rick Dalton are scrupulously managed. I mean, one could say, in keeping with a lot of Quentin Tarantino movies, that this is probably a bit too discursive and a bit too rambling for its own good. And I would be inclined to agree, but I think the atmosphere that this creates, this sort of sunny, optimistic atmosphere of Los Angeles at this time, prior to the collapse of the hippie movement, prior to the emergence of the Manson family, is really, really well wrought. And I could wander around in this landscape for a very, very long time. And I think that a lot of that is helped by the presence of Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate, who doesn't speak very much. This was the subject of some controversy at Cannes, which caused Quentin Tarantino to shut down an interviewer's line of questioning. But I think what Robbie does, she gets the physical presence of Sharon Tate, that kind of exuberant, sunny optimism that I think she and Tarantino do dignity to the legacy of Sharon Tate, who was just coming into her own as an actress around this time. And so consequently, and somewhat ironically, the kind of exuberance and warmth and happiness that Margot Robbie exudes as this character in a largely physical form only amplifies the sense of melancholy surrounding the real life incidents in the background of the movie. So you've got all of that going on. And then I have to be really careful not to give away anything here, because you've got that tone which is largely set for the majority of the movie, and it's a long movie, it's a Tarantino movie, although for me it didn't feel long. Certainly it didn't feel as kind of annoyingly overlong as something like The Hateful Eight. But then you get to the last 20 minutes, and this is where I have to be very, very careful. This is where I absolutely cannot give anything away. Suffice to say that the movie takes a turn for the batshit insane. And this is where the movie is really, really going to divide people. Indeed, it already has. I know there are people at the press screening that I know where I saw it that are really, really split on the final sort of 20, 25 minutes of the movie. I liked what Tarantino did with it. I think it's a rug pull on the audience, but not in a smug, annoying way, as in something like Death Proof, as in like a filmmaker trying to get one over the audience. What Tarantino is doing is he's playing against our wish fulfillment expectations, and he's kind of unpicking that very, very tricky intersection point between reality and fantasy in terms of like what do we choose to take stock in. And given this is a movie that is clearly a celebration of Tarantino's youth, it's a celebration of the small screen and the big screen of pop culture, of cinema. You have it. The movie is about sort of unpicking on a very, very kind of metatextual level that very fine line between what is a fairy tale make believe and what is real. I'm trying to be as vague as possible, because the developments that you get in the last 20 minutes of this movie are as provocative and as shocking and in many ways as disturbing as anything that Tarantino has done. But I think it was done with a point. I think that Tarantino has got things to say in this, in contrast to things like Kill Bill and Death Proof and The Hateful Eight, in which I think he didn't have anything to say in those movies. He's not using violence as a crutch in this. He's actually using it to make an interesting dramatic point that I think is a sign of his increased maturity as a filmmaker. I know that might not be a popular opinion when you guys go and see the movie. I'll be really, really interested to know what you think, because it is going to divide opinion. It already has divided opinion. I think that it's on the whole, even though you have these kind of mercurial shifts in tone that kind of knock you back in your seat. I mean, it is a Tarantino movie after all. I think this is his most contemplative and grown-up movie since Jackie Brown. I think that he's commenting on the advancing of middle age, on screen violence, and of the nature of storytelling in ways that are largely laid back and sweet and endearing, which take a turn for the very, very shocking and disturbing towards the end. It's called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's out in the UK on the 14th of August, so please do let me know your thoughts, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.